Hello, everyone. President, ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of UNHCR. Good morning, everyone. As you know, today is a very exciting day. We're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Geneva Convention of 1951 on the status of refugees. It's this blue book, which I have in front of me, and it's a textbook for a lot of people who work tirelessly, as you saw in the video, to protect other human beings. And I say this and know what I'm talking about because for over 15 years I've been a Goodwill ambassador for UNHCR, and I've visited terrible corners of the world, borders of countries in conflict, failed states from Syria to Somalia and from Libya to Ethiopia. So really I have seen firsthand, and that's why I always bear witness to it, because sometimes they ask me, well, what do you do, all that money that's collected? And I can actually bear witness to the fact that there are a lot of people working hard and risking their lives to save other human beings. And that is why today we want to emphasize the importance and the currents of this convention, which, as you know, was established initially as a temporary mandate for 3 years after the Second World War, but currently over 82 people are under the umbrella and the protection of the United Nations Agency for Refugees, UNHCR, and there's lots of work to be done. And I'm very proud that the UN has selected Spain to celebrate this anniversary. I just heard from the High Commissioner, and by the way, I maybe forgot to say hello to you, but I'm sorry. And he was telling me that it is the only country where they're officially going to celebrate the 70th anniversary because, and this is something we should be proud of as Spaniards, we are the European country that has most supported UNHCR with more members, more donors. So I think that says a lot about us and our generosity and our solidarity. Don't want to take up any more of your time. I'm going to leave this little book here, and I'm going to give the floor to Filippo Grandi, who's High Commissioner of the United Nations for Refugees. Thank you so much, Jesús, also for your work. Very important role supporting UNHCR as Goodwill Ambassador. Dear President Sanchez, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a huge pleasure for me to be with you all here today. I want to thank the Spanish government and particularly President Sanchez for giving us this chance, as Jesús has just mentioned, to celebrate together the 70th anniversary of the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees. I would also like to thank Spain and its civil society for its generosity towards refugees and to recognize their commitment in the search for solutions, both multilateral but also regionally, nationally and locally. We have seen over the last months the efforts of this government to respond to the difficult situation in Afghanistan and their support in other places where forced displacement is also an issue, including Latin America, or their contribution to vaccination programs against COVID-19 globally. Today's event is not just a celebration. It's also an opportunity to reflect on the value of this convention over the last 7 decades and on its ability to adapt, and that's really important, to new circumstances. And it is thanks to this instrument that we have been able to save millions of lives. The Convention defines who is a refugee and defines the need to provide protection, assistance, and social rights. The Convention has 2 essential principles: the right of all to seek and enjoy asylum, and the absolute prohibition to return a refugee. The Convention is a live instrument. It's crucial in a changing international environment. And that is why its mandate has inspired various regional agreements, including, for example, the Cartagena Declaration in Latin America, or the joint asylum system of the European Union. The political agenda in 1951 was very different to today's. However, this framework of human rights still protects the victims of new forms of persecution, violence, and conflicts, including new contexts, including natural disasters caused by climate change or pandemics like COVID-19, or violence against women and girls, or persecution for reasons of gender identity or sexual orientation. In spite of that, there are still multiple challenges. In this last year, during the pandemic, over 200 countries closed their borders, and over 60 of them did not make any exception for asylum seekers. Walls today are a material example of the refusal of access to asylum. Everywhere in the world we see everyday examples of returns and violence in borders. And we know the challenge raised by illegal immigration, and it is important to find practical and humane solutions which will not go against basic human rights. Sometimes we see a confusion, sometimes a deliberate confusion between the different needs of immigrants and refugees, seeking political credit and awakening the worst reactions in our societies. Even some European countries are now presenting draft laws to outsource the right to asylum, thus laying their responsibilities upon the shoulders of poorer nations or distant islands. We're also concerned by strong differences in refugee recognition rates within the European Union. Something must be wrong when response rates are so different with the same conflicts and the same circumstances. And today we are, in fact, unable to calculate the number of lives lost at sea to people seeking protection. In this sense, I'd like to recognize, Mr. President, the role of the Spanish Coast Guard. Their task is a practical example of the defense of life and universal principles that we are celebrating here today. And it's these examples which make us feel hope. This spirit of solidarity is absolutely the driver of the Global Pact on Refugees. States have agreed to share the responsibility of sheltering and protecting refugees, together with actors from civil society, NGOs, companies, universities, public administrations, or cities, amongst others. It envisions an inclusive future where refugees will be able to fully contribute with their skills, capabilities, and strengths to their societies. And to do that, it is crucial to promote resettlement from an initial reception country, humanitarian visas, or grants for refugee students. Also, community sponsorship projects which emerged in Canada over 50 years ago and which involve civil society in the asylum process. Every day we see how in Spain community sponsorship, specifically in the Basque Country, in Valencia, in Navarra, is once again proving the tremendous social commitment of its citizens. I hope that it will be able to expand in the future throughout the country through a national program. And I'd like to close with this by expressing my profound gratitude towards Spanish society, which is not only welcoming but also shows tremendous solidarity. Spanish citizens are today the main private donor for UNHCR, with over 500,000 people regularly supporting our humanitarian work. And their work and their help goes well beyond their financial input, because it is tremendously valuable for our morale as well. Spain's energy encourages us to keep up our optimism and to cultivate hope. And it is a shining example of international solidarity that the preamble of the Convention defines as essential in order to achieve solutions for the problems that are causing refugee flows. And for all of these reasons, I want to thank you.
Ya os dije que era un día para sacar pecho como españoles. Muchas gracias.
I told you that today was a day to feel proud of being Spanish. Thank you, Filippo. And what's brought us together here, as I said before, is not just to celebrate the 70th anniversary of a convention, but also to celebrate the value of that convention today, protecting those who have had to leave everything behind, to celebrate the strength and the courage of these people who are true heroes all. And we wanted to hear firsthand testimonials from people who lost everything, but thanks to UNHCR's support, have been able to rebuild their lives, and who are here with us. So I'm going to call upon Sadaf and Amal to join us here, and we're going to sit here and have a bit of a chat.
Y yo me vuelvo a poner.
And I'm going to once again sit on a stool. And you will not remember this because you're too young, but I started out on TV sitting on a stool and talking to young people in a show that was called People Get Along by Chatting. And of course, you're from Afghanistan, you're a boxer. You have lived in exile from a very early age, first in Iran. For 9 years, you were part of the first and only female boxing team from Afghanistan, together with your sister. And you were selected for the London 2012 Olympics, but at the last minute you were unable to participate for security reasons. You became famous because of being Afghan boxers. In fact, there were films made about you and some documentaries, I believe. But, of course, together with the successes and the medals came the threats and the persecution. Tell me, and give me a chance to listen to you. What was the hardest part of this whole process, but also what was the happiest moment?
My worst memory is when the Taliban arrived in my country years ago, and there was a lot of insecurity, and we had to leave, the whole family. We had to go to Iran, and we were refugees there. My 5 brothers and sisters and my parents. And my father was working in Afghanistan in an office of the government. And in Iran, he had to start working as a gardener, to feed the family. And so that we could go to school, and that's where we started doing sports. So I was 8 years old, and I remember that the life of my family was really hard there. It was really tough for us. Another unpleasant memory I have is when in 2014, the Taliban killed my older sister's husband. He was also an athlete, and they'd only been married for 1 month when that happened, when he was killed. And they cut off his head, and they sent it to our house. And last week, they cut off the head of a woman who was a volleyball player in Afghanistan.
That's it? Or you just to move to continue?
Es que es duro, sí.
Don't worry, breathe. I know it's a really hard story to share. It's so hard. But of course, do take off the mask and take a deep breath. Don't worry. Thank you, Antonio. And that way, we can all see your face. You too, Amal, if you want to. Just take a deep breath. And whenever you're ready, just finish your story.
And my best memory was when I came to Spain, and to feel that I was safe. And also the help I got from the government and from the soldiers, from Spanish soldiers who got my family out. They got us out of the hands of the Taliban.
Because your family has been able to fly to Spain from Afghanistan with a group of people that we were able to bring out.
Family except my husband. So they arrived in August, and my parents and my brothers and sisters, and now the whole family is together, and I'm really happy. I'm so happy.
To hear that. Okay, that's it. Well done. It wasn't that hard. I know they were very nervous, both of them, to speak here in public. And I think, Ahmad, you were looking forward to meeting her, right? I heard that you really admire her and that you wanted to meet her in person. Anyway, here she is. Now you've gotten to know each other, and hopefully you'll become friends after this. Let's talk a little bit about you, Amal, because you graduated last year in political science, right? With a grant from the Ministry of Education. And you work at THEAR. You're a co-founder, and I love reading this, together with your aunt, of an NGO to fight against female genital mutilation. First time I visited the refugee camps in Dadaab, and you're from Somalia, in 2007. One of the first projects that I wanted to launch, and which is still ongoing, was a project to fight against female genital mutilation. So we started with one woman. I think there's now 200 girls or more who've been saved from this. So, but you tell us, you got to Kenya, to these camps in 2007, which is when I was there. And I know that thanks to UNHCR and to the Spanish authorities, you've been able to rebuild your lives. So tell us your story, or what message would you like to share?
We came from Somalia, been here almost 16 years. We were in the Dadaab refugee camp. Somalia is one of the great forgotten conflicts of the world. It's been going on for so many years. There's civil war, and also the climate change, and FGM is obviously a problem there, as you said. So we wanted to be agents for change. All the women in my family have been victims of FGM, and my mother, who really should be here today too, she's the person who decided that we have to have a before and after. We have to put an end to this to protect us. She was the one who got all my siblings out of the country, because it was either they became child soldiers in the war, or, that was her only choice. She had to get us out of Somalia. So we went to Kenya, and then time went by, and we were able to be reunited, because the second most important thing happened in our lives, which is when it was my turn to have FGM, and my mother said, no, that's not an option. And she decided that this meant that I could die from this FGM process.
It's just incredible, Amal, how difficult it is to put an end to FGM, because people don't realize, but in the camps themselves, if the girls are not, if they do not undergo FGM, they are rejected by other children, they're rejected in schools and bullied, and they beat them, and so it's really difficult. She was very brave.
Definitely, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of social pressure. There's thousands of reasons that push girls into not being able to decide, or as mothers, to say that my daughter is not going to be a victim of FGM. And many times mothers will do it to protect their daughters, so that they can go to school, so they don't suffer social stigma and rejection, and for them to have a future.
So they can get married, simply because if they haven't undergone FGM, they cannot get married.
And my mother decided, no, she got us out of there. And thanks to the possibility of being able to ask for protection from a third country, we were given protection. And from Kenya, we came to Spain.
So you're really the living example of the fact that there can be a way out of these nightmares with international support, with the help of UNHCR and the governments of the different states. And I'm really happy. And I could talk to you on and on, but of course there's a lot of things still to hear today. So if you like, you can return to your chairs in the audience. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Thank you. Okay, and now we're going to hear from Barbara Hendricks, one of the most acclaimed sopranos in the world, who is also a Goodwill ambassador emeritus, lifelong Goodwill ambassador for UNHCR. Let's hear from her.
President Sanchez, High Commissioner Grandi, Excellencies, dear friends, it is a great honor for me to join you today to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the 1951 Refugee Convention. This occasion offers us an opportunity not only to reflect on the past 70 years, but also to reaffirm our commitment to the principles of the Convention. This convention has proven to be as relevant today as it was in 1951, even in the context of a global pandemic. When I joined UNHCR over 35 years ago, there were around 12 million refugees in the world. Today, that number is over 26 million, who together with those internally displaced and asylum seekers amount to a shocking figure of 82 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes and are in need of protection. 82 million stories, 82 million dreams and hopes. During the years that I have been a Goodwill ambassador, I have drawn inspiration from my UNHCR colleagues in the field who devote their lives, and some have even lost their lives, for the refugee cause. I've also drawn encouragement from refugees that I have met and have been humbled by their plight, especially the women who with their children represent more than 80% of all refugees. When I have been my most discouraged, I need only to remember the eyes of the courageous women and girls that I have met, who with great dignity face nearly insurmountable difficulties and dangers of refugee life. Many have told me unique and touching stories about their lives and the horrors of their flight, but they also spoke passionately of their hopes and dreams for the future, which are no different from those that mothers all over the world have for their families. To be able to contribute in a positive way to a society that recognizes and accepts them. The 1951 Convention encourages us to take care of one another. Each one of us can in some way make a real difference. I am the founding president of the board of Sweden for UNHCR, one of UNHCR's national fundraising partners, and our sister organization, España con ACNUR, has been an important inspiration to us. The Spanish civil society is a beautiful example of what solidarity toward those in need really means. On behalf of my sisters and brothers who have been and are now refugees, I thank you for your solidarity and your unwavering support for UNHCR's mandate and purpose. My personal experience has been that an outstretched hand never comes back empty, but is filled with the warmth of human kindness. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Oh Lord, ways from home, a long ways from home. Thank you very much.
Bueno,
Well, that was so moving, this gospel spiritual that came from the cry of slave mothers for their children who were sold in slave auctions. So I'd like to talk more about the role of civil society in the history of the UNHCR. And so where's Rosa? Come on up, Rosa Montero. You know who she is. She's a journalist. She's a writer. Antonio Garrigues, please, Honorary President of Spain with the UNHCR and with an international reputation. I don't have to go into detail. You all know who he is. Rosa, how are you? Tell me, what led you to support the cause of refugees?
Well, first, just it was my own empathy and so on. But the most important thing is that supporting the cause of refugees is good for everyone. I think that is a key message, because the issues of refugees and the issue of climate change are the two major global challenges faced by this world, which could bring about a global disaster. And they're interconnected, as the High Commissioner has pointed out. The worse the environmental conditions, the worse the social conditions, the worse the political conditions. So it's all to spiral, obviously, and so it's something that definitely benefits us all. And there's a problem, which is that when you try and convey the issues of refugees to society, when you write an article, you publish in social media, you get two responses that are very worrying. There's some positive ones, of course, but the bad ones, which are very concerning, are the following. First, that there are people who are willing, but they feel so hopeless. They feel it's such a huge problem that it makes them feel so anguished that they just are unable to do anything and don't want to even hear about it. And that's a concern, but we can leave that for later. But the biggest worry are those people who say to you, oh, well, how can we worry about Afghans with all the problems and pain we have to deal here or in our own country, with all the poverty we have here, until we fix the poverty and the problems here? And that's that cognitive fallacy of nirvana, which says that if you don't have as long as you have a starving child here, that's all you need to focus on, and that means you should never do anything anywhere else. Traditional fallacy. And I think that is where we really have to focus on those attitudes, because what is there and what is here?
Another fallacy about they're invading us and it's an invasion.
But of course, that's an outright lie. That's not just a cognitive fallacy. That is political manipulation, and it's an outright lie, and they know that. But so you cannot speak about out there and in here, and that's the point. And I think we live, and that's actually the most important point, to act and to support and help refugees and to fight climate change. We have traditional resources, of course. We can provide funding, we can volunteer, we can demonstrate, we can vote responsibly for governments that will do the right thing. But I think we're living at a critical crossroads when we really need to change our attitudes and understand that unless we are all saved, none of us will be saved. We should have learned that from the pandemic, but it seems we have not quite learned that lesson yet. For example, in Europe, there's over 70% vaccination rate, but in Africa, it's only 4%. Apart from the injustice, it's stupid, because there will be more variants and mutations of the virus, and we will never be free of this pandemic. So we either learn that we live in a very small world and we either save everyone or no one will be saved, and we act accordingly. That is by demanding the right global economic and health policies and push our governments to do the same. And we either become disseminators of this concept in our own societies, that we could either all be saved or none will be saved, like a mantra. We need to convince everyone and force our governments to move in the right direction. And thank you to UNHCR for being there in the field. What would the world be without you?
With you. We've mentioned Antonio several times already today, that the Spanish Committee, the UNHCR Spanish Committee, that you're the Honorary President. So I'd like to talk about the solidarity of the Spanish people that we've also mentioned, and climate change, which Rosa just brought that up here. You've done a really good project that's about climate change. Could you explain it a bit?
Well, yes, I'd also like to start by saying that there isn't a single country that has not suffered or received immigrants or refugees. And Spain itself has been a source of a lot of economic immigrants who experience great suffering, and also a lot of political refugees. And people, for some reason, tend to forget that. And so we have the duty to remember that. And I always say that one of the most basic of human rights is the right to live in your own country. And if that right is destroyed, you have an absolute right to live elsewhere or to receive support, because you have that absolute right to live in your country. And if you're not unable to do that, you have the right to be given asylum and shelter by other countries. And that is a concept that we need to always keep in mind, because Spain has been a source of political refugees, which have then played a crucial role in the history of Spain, and all those immigrants who had to live abroad and experience great suffering. And I think that is really the key. We need to remember that. And as for civil society, I am, as you've said, the Honorary President of the Spanish UNHCR Committee. Of course, everybody understands what an Honorary President does. Of course, there's the people who actually do the work, and that's a wonderful team of people, including Francesco, who's here amongst others, who is a sort of, I have never seen anybody do more fundraising in less time. He's amazing, including the president of the government himself. Pockets he's been able to tap. But really, there's a person, as you've mentioned, Francesco was actually with
in Somalia, and that's where I met Francesco.
Francesco, as you know, has been able to get Spain to become the country that is the biggest private contributor through its donors to this cause.
It's really interesting that you just said, which is another fallacy. I don't know if it's a cognitive fallacy. I'm not as smart as you are, Rosa. But I'm constantly fighting against this, which is no refugee wants to leave their country. You just said that. Nobody wants to leave their country and go to another country where they don't know the language, they don't know the customs, they don't, their university degrees aren't recognized. Abba was just telling us about this, and she had to, go back and study again. Refugees don't want to leave their countries. They have to leave.
That's what we cannot forget. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your experience, your intelligence, the light that you're casting on this subject. Thank you so much.
Antes de dar paso al
And before the President of the government comes up to tell us some words, we're going to listen to the message from Justin Trudeau. I'm not really a French speaker. Justin Trudeau, from a country that's been pioneering in these issues in so many aspects, including the programs for community sponsoring of refugees. Canada presided over the first platform for assisting people for forced displacement from Central America and especially Guatemala.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Canada is a nation of diverse people with roots in every corner of the globe. It's part of what makes us Canadian, and it's a strength that is reflected in the way we approach the world. Our country has a strong history of opening our arms and our borders to those in need, from the Indo-Chinese people in the 1980s to the Syrian refugees over the past 6 years to the Afghans we're resettling today. The many refugees and displaced people who've resettled in Canada have shaped our country for the better. They have enriched our communities and they have helped build the country we know today. Le Canada a bénéficié de l'arrivée des populations les plus vulnérables du monde. 70 ans plus tard, notre pays continue d'être un ardent défenseur de la Convention de 1951 relative au statut des réfugiés. Et nous soutenons le travail essentiel que le HCR accomplit afin de promouvoir la cause des réfugiés et leurs efforts pour atténuer les vulnérabilités auxquelles ils font face, ainsi que les autres personnes déplacées. Cependant, à l'heure où nous rendons hommage au dévouement dont le HCR fait preuve dans sa mission de protection depuis les 70 dernières années, nous devons aussi être conscients qu'une personne sur 95 est aujourd'hui déplacée de force. Cela porte à plus de 82 millions le nombre de personnes déplacées de force dans le monde. Chacune de ces personnes a sa propre histoire. Ce sont des gens qui cherchent à obtenir les droits et libertés fondamentaux auxquels ils ont droit sans discrimination. My friends, we all have a responsibility to continue to open our doors and lend a welcoming hand to those fleeing violence, persecution, and conflict. To welcome our most vulnerable neighbors, no matter where they're from, during their time of greatest need, and to give them the opportunity to build a new and better future for themselves and for their families. So, let's use this anniversary to strengthen our resolve and bolster our efforts to support the world's most vulnerable. And together, let's choose compassion over division. Je tiens à remercier le HCR, les membres de son personnel et ses nombreux partenaires des quatre coins du monde pour leurs efforts infatigables, leur dévouement et leur service à la cause des réfugiés. Je tiens également à saluer les nombreux Canadiens qui ont offert du soutien à des centaines de milliers de réfugiés. Leur compassion est un exemple pour chacun de nous. Le Canada se joint à l'Espagne et à d'autres pays pour vous remercier et il continuera à travailler à vos côtés. Once again, thank you for everything you've done and continue to do. Merci.
Me encanta.
I love this guy, really. Okay, it's actually so important, that idea of the great contribution that refugees made to a country. They're always a tremendous asset for the communities that they join, always. I love this man, but of course our president of our own government is also pretty wonderful, so I'm going to leave you with him, Pedro Sanchez.
Thank you, Jesús. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, ministers. Madam Minister, dear Filippo, thank you so much for coming here again to be with us here in Spain. Thanks also to the witnesses who have been with us today. You know, there's a Peruvian writer, Gabriela Wiener. She's been living in Spain for some time now, 15 years. She has some verses that say, and I quote, "To migrate is not to be reborn. It is to rename what already had a name." But of all those who had to learn to rename, the most dramatic situation, and it's been said here before, is that of refugees, who often have to leave their country without time to even pick up their memories, their most intimate belongings. And one of the greatest trials that human beings can face is to start a life all over again. To be forced to start from scratch because they have to, as Antonio said, fleeing from violence, from persecution, from injustice. It means going back to the very beginning and plunging into a void. When I was listening to what you ladies had to say earlier, I couldn't think of any more terrible sentence. To be forced to leave your people, your friends, your family, your husband, as it happened to you. To leave the landscapes where you grew up, to leave your job, all of your personal things, your customs, your culture, to leave your own language. And You know, you speak Spanish really well. Congratulations for having learned it so quickly. And this was something that the Spanish Republican exiles had to do not so long ago, as Antonio said, when they sought refuge in the rest of Europe and in other latitudes as well. But obviously, language unites us, and there's so much controversy in Mexico. I mean, there was such a contribution of the Republican exile community to the diversity of that great country. Well, refugees have to leave in all the things they are. And other people who are here today can listen to stories like the lives of Amal and Sadaf without being moved. What your mother had to say was just extraordinarily moving. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. You are a living example of human beings' resilience and capacity to overcome diversity, of how far people can go when they receive assistance, help at the moment they most need it. Spain, my country, is not oblivious to the reality of refugees, because the Spanish people are full of solidarity. They are, my dear High Commissioner for Refugees, we are. And they can't ignore the suffering of others, even though it's far from our borders. I have no doubt that this shared feeling of solidarity, together with the extraordinary work being done by the Spanish civil society, which is the other star of this event today, is behind the fact that Spain is the top private donor in the world to UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. And the commitment of the Spain with the UNHCR committee is really what drives our relationship with the High Commission, and that's what justifies the fact that, as Jesús said, that we're celebrating today in Madrid the 70th anniversary of the convention relating to the status of refugees. And if something characterizes the work of the UNHCR in these 70 years, it's been its constant capacity to adapt to new challenges. And these last few years have been particularly intense in that regard. And I think it is really timely, everything we've been talking about today, because Rosa before was talking about how COVID-19 has a lot to teach us, and I agree with her fully. The pandemic that we are suffering right now is one of the greatest challenges that humanity has had to react to face in such a sudden way. And just this week, we're celebrating the World Week of Science. And you can see that science is what has given us the instruments necessary to overcome this pandemic. Never before has there been such a quick response with such a wide-ranging response, but it's asymmetrical to a global issue. And Spain wants to be in the front line. We are in the front line of the response through vaccination. We have already sent more than 24 million vaccines in a solidarity manner, but in the first quarter of 2022, we're going to reach 50 million doses of donated vaccines, and that is very important, because right now we're seeing how the developed countries are beginning to have a reserve stock of vaccines, and they're starting to donate their vaccines, but we particularly started doing that with Latin America, my dear Rosa, before 50% of our population was vaccinated, and that's very important because it shows, without any kind of rejection on the part of Spanish society, how the solidarity that we have, how full of solidarity Spanish society is in the face of a global situation, as you said before, like the COVID-19 pandemic. But these donations, these doses of vaccines, make us in the top 10 in the world of donors. Well, in the EU, we're at the very top, but we're among the top 10 in the world. And we're second in the world for Latin America and the Caribbean as far as donating vaccinations. I think we're going to continue down this same path. We're going to meet the target that was set by the WHO, that's backed at the recent summit of the G20 in Rome, of reaching this 70% of the world, of the developed world, to be immunized by mid-2022, but not just the developed world, the entire world. And I do think, dear Commissioner, that that is possible for all of humanity. But we're also aware, dear High Commissioner, that the cooperation mechanisms are not reaching everyone. We know that. Refugees have especially suffered the impact of the pandemic. Many of them have suffered the pandemic while they were trapped in enormously, extraordinarily vulnerable areas outside any conventional healthcare system or network. And that's why I want to announce to you today that the government of Spain is going to reserve 2 million doses of vaccines for these humanitarian situations. We're going to continue working with the UNHCR and with other institutions to get these vaccines into the arms that need them, that most need them. I also wanted to share with all of you the fact that the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is another of the great causes for extreme concern in the world in this recent year. And once again, UNHCR is on the front lines of the efforts to alleviate the situation of millions of displaced Afghans, internally displaced and also displaced in the neighboring countries. Spain has evacuated more than 2,200 people this year. And we've also offered our country as a center for the evacuation of Afghan collaborators from other countries and European institutions who need to get out of the country. And that's a very positive example of cooperation in situations of emergency that everyone here knows very well, especially the ministers. You have no idea, Sadav, how moved I was by knowing that your family was able to get on one of those Spanish Air Force planes. I'm so sorry that your husband can't be here with us today. And I've said this so many times, I will never forget the eyes of all these people when we went to see them at the Torrejón Air Base last August when they arrived, these children, men and women who stepped on Spanish soil for the first time, and they felt safe, they felt comforted to be in a country that was receiving them with open arms and solidarity. That's more than 22,000 Afghans who have been protected in the member states of the European Union, who have found protection here. And rest assured that we will continue to work both in Spain and in the European Union level to offer all of you a future of opportunity and hope. Now, before both Antonio and Rosa answering one of Jesús's questions referred to climate change. And it's true that the scenario of Afghanistan, we can't forget other situations that are involved in this, how millions of people are experiencing around our planet the impact of climate change. And for geographical reasons and other more direct reasons of interest for our country, I want to focus especially on this severe situation that we're seeing in Sahel. The UNHCR in Spain have been very present in this region for some time, and we're going to continue to collaborate, dear High Commissioner, very closely in the coming years. In Sahel, we've seen how not only conflicts force people to abandon their land. The climate emergency is also becoming one of the principal causes for forced displacement, as you all know, both internal and international. And as we've heard here today, more than 30 million people were compelled to be internally displaced because of natural disasters. The vast majority of them related to natural disasters, related to climate change, hurricanes, cyclones. In some, climate change, the climate emergency is dramatically intensifying these flows of people. And now is the time to reflect on the international protection status that we should give to climate refugees. And as I was able to indicate during the COP25 convention last week, we need a new international order that accepts that this decade is crucial. It's the most decisive if we want, for once and for all, to mitigate greenhouse gases and their impact on our planet, and also to adapt to the consequences that are already existing because of climate change in much of the planet. Like the climate emergency, the situation of refugees around the world can only be addressed out of efforts and out of what the Prime Minister of Canada just said, multilateral cooperation and the commitment of everyone. And here, I want to congratulate the UNHCR for the excellent work that they've been doing to make the UN General Assembly approve in 2018 the Global Compact for Refugees. That was a crucial landmark, dear High Commissioner, to share our efforts to guarantee international protection for those who most need it. and also to raise funds and to seek solutions to today's drama of these refugees, and also is an excellent guide, I think, for our national policies here. We've talked about this on other occasions when we had a chance to see each other and talk about these issues. And I also wanted to tell you, dear High Commissioner, that Spain is working on a national plan for the application of this Global Compact, which is complementary to another line of action that I want to share with you today, which is to prepare, dear Minister, the first Spanish strategy for humanitarian diplomacy. And one of the priority lines of this new Spanish strategy for humanitarian diplomacy is precisely that of addressing the issue of refugees. And this strategy has been consulted with civil society. It's going to provide a timely framework for today's situation, which is so dramatic, marked by the need to respond to the humanitarian needs in places of such special interest for our country, for Spain, such as Afghanistan, but also undoubtedly, as Jesús said before, Libya, Syria, the Sahel, and looking towards Latin America, and in particularly Central America. Because precisely in Central America, between July of 2020 and July of 2021, Spain had the chance to share this situation. We were especially active because we held the rotating presidency of the platform to address forced displacement in this region. What's called the MIPS, the Comprehensive Regional Protection Solution Framework, is one of the three platforms, regional platforms created by the UNHCR to address the issue of refugees around the world. And the Spanish presidency ended with a celebration on last 10 of July of a solidarity event that was able to mobilize nothing more, nothing less than $110 million, double the target that we had marked for ourselves. And Spain provided 6.3 million euros to the project. And we can't forget that there's more than 5 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants. And unfortunately, so many of them are refugees from Nicaragua. And obviously, many of them, 400,000 Venezuelans are living right now in Spain. In 2020, Venezuelans were the first nationality, the top nationality in number of those who were asking for asylum in our country. Spain, of course, is profoundly committed to alleviating the situation of these Venezuelan refugees, and we're going to devote a total of 100 million euros between the two conferences of donors that have been held for Venezuela in some to alleviate the situation of Venezuelan refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll wrap it up. I wanted to once again thank the UNHCR, to all the people who contribute in one way or another with their work, to keeping alive during 70 years the spirit of the convention, and for reminding us of something so fundamental, that we need to continue to work unceasingly to help those who have had to leave everything to save their lives. I was saying in this country where we've had hundreds of thousands of refugees in time not so far in the past, I think it's something we always have to remember for a society like ours. And the Spanish writer and diplomat, Angel Garrigues said, "A nation that brings up children who have to flee it because they can't put up with injustice is greater than for those who have to leave than those who have to stay." So that's why, dear Amal and Saraf, I'm asking you from the bottom of my heart to never forget the greatness of your homelands. And I know you don't do that. Precisely because people like you make your homelands great, courageous, and resilient. You make your homelands great by defending the values of justice that forced you to flee them. But you also make great this new homeland that we are offering you, Spain, with your example, with your witness, and with your work. In Spain, you will learn to name that which already had a name for you before you came here. You'll have two words to say future, to say home, to say freedom. And it is our wish, and my personal wish, that you also have two words to say happiness. Thank you so much, and happy anniversary.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, President Sanchez. And now I'd like to say a couple of things in closing, things that I forgot to mention earlier. Saada's family had to leave Kabul with the clothes on their back. Literally, they had a small backpack and they actually lost it on their way, and they arrived in Spain with nothing. That's the reality of millions of people. And two, Fernando, we have to bring the husband, Fernando, from Iran, where he is right now. We have to get the husband here. We've done so well. So let's really complete the task. And three, for me, the 15 years that I've been supporting UNHCR have really given my life tremendous meaning, because those of us who work on TV and the media live lives that are really a bit removed from reality, all those the spotlight, the camera, fame. And UNHCR really brought me back to the ground with being able to help others who were in need. One day I received a T-shirt, my TV program, with Einstein's face on it, which said he was also once a refugee. Can you imagine what would have happened to the world if he hadn't had help? Thank you very much, everyone, and let's keep helping.